The talk title today is Tending the Family Tree. So October, wow, isn't it crazy how fast the year goes by? But October, we have a theme here at Namaste for October, which is expansive kinship. And last week, Reverend James kicked off the month talking about animal kinship and how that works in our life. He talked about the menagerie of animals he seems to have at his home. He says he has 4 dogs there. And then he followed that up with a discussion about how we have a kinship with all the animals around the world, which is absolutely true, right? We are not a standalone species. We need everything that lives in the world in order for us to survive. Now this week, we're going to narrow it down a little bit. You know, kinship with all the animals in the world is a little bit broad. So we're going to take it down to kinship with the human race. And even we're going to pare it down a little bit more, really. What I really want to be talking about today is kinship with our own kin, with our own family in particular. So the talk title today is Tending the Family Tree. And you know, you may have, I know I sort of do, you may have some Neanderthals that hang from your family tree, but we're going to consider them human for today's purpose. But when I first started to think about this talk, Reverend James asked me a couple months ago, so, you know, I've had a couple months to try and think about, well, what would I actually want to say? And I knew I wanted to talk about family. And, you know, as I kept thinking about it, I kept realizing that, you know, I had had a pretty hard time with the concept of family when I was a kid, and also for the first maybe half of my adult life. I had a lot of judgments about myself regarding family, and then I had a lot of judgments about my family and kind of these preconceived notions about who they were and what they were. You know, but it's all really in my head, right? It's my stuff that I had about them, not so much the truth of them. But, you know, I was really kind of uncomfortable with it, you know, to the point where I know for a fact that for most of my childhood, I was just hoping somebody would kind of snip off my branch from the family tree and graft it onto somebody else's family tree. I didn't really care which one, you know. In fact, I would go around, I would pick, you know, I want that one over there. But, you know, that didn't happen, and I stayed with my family, and it was a good thing, you know, in retrospect. But it definitely had a lot of energy around it, and I was sitting here thinking, well, why was there so much energy? And I realized that there was a lot of energy around it because out in the media, we are told constantly over and over and over again that we ourselves are going to be formed either by nurture or by nature, right? Those are the two things that we're told. That's how you're going to be. Those are the two influences in your life. So if we're talking about nature, then we're talking about genetics primarily. And they'll say, well, you know, genetics mean that this is how long you're going to live because these are your genes. Or you're going to be fat or thin because these are in your genes. Or, you know, a lot of things they'll say about our personality attributes are about your genes. So here you have your family tree is predominant then in that way of thinking about who you are and who you're going to become. And then the nurture part, you know, there's that old saying, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree, right? Well, that's just basically saying that whoever your parents and whoever your family, because they're the ones that nurture you as you're growing up, whoever they are, you know, you're going to turn out like them. So, you know, if you follow the voice of everyday reason, that would mean that your family tree has defined who you are. And it's going to define who you're going to become. It's going to define who your children are, right? And so I remember having a lot of angst about that as a young adult in particular. And so it leaves me with the question now of, well, what should we believe? What is it that we should believe? What should be our relationship to our family tree? And how do we tend our family tree? Because the truth is our family tree is this organic thing that's still growing around us always. It's not static. It's not a piece of paper that we write down names on. It's actually much more than that. So, you know, when I start to do a talk, I start looking for things that match up with the talk that I'm looking for. And it's always surprising to me where the inspiration comes from, because it could end up being, you know, a conversation with a friend, or a book I'm reading, or a billboard that I see as I'm going by on the freeway. You know, it just always amazes me. It's always different. In this particular, for this particular talk, I happened to turn on the radio, and there it was tuned to NPR, and they were doing a story from StoryCorps. Now, if you're not familiar with StoryCorps, this is a process that they go through where they have sound booths located in several cities, and it's meant for two people, and you go in and you either have a conversation, or you may have an interview between these two people, but then they record it, they edit it down, and store it, and some of those get put onto NPR. Now, before I tell you the story that inspired me, I'm going to tell you it's a little bit sad. Okay, so it's a little bit of a sad story, but I want you to trust that I'm going to bring it up a notch afterwards, right? So, you know, feel free to go with me, because you're not going to get trapped down in the sadness. But the two people that were on this story, the first one was a man, and he is the son of an airline pilot who was murdered during a hijack back in 1971. And he was only 18 months old when his father was murdered in this hijacking, and he didn't have much of a connection to his father because of that. What he had was, his mother said that his father was now flying for God, so he would look up into the plane, you know, the planes going overhead, and he would have his connection to his father in that way. The other person that was in this story, this interview, was a woman who was the daughter of the hijacker. And she was 13 years old when this all occurred. And at that time, she knew that her father was kind of a dangerous man, potentially a violent man. She knew that, but she was 13. What could she do? And basically what her father handed her on that day was a box of guilt. You know, a box of guilt that she had to carry with her for the rest of her life. And so, you know, she took that guilt, and when she grew into her early womanhood, when she was about 20, she says, that guilt went along with her to the point that she considered, she went to a trauma specialist and she asked whether she should be sterilized, because she was so worried about sending her father's genes on into the gene pool after her. So let's breathe for a second. The reason that pulled at my heartstrings is I had that feeling when I was that age too. I didn't have the violence or anything like that in my family tree, but I definitely had a little bit of a crazy gene going on, maybe, or at least I judged it as a crazy gene. And so, you know, I was wondering whether or not I should have children. And actually at about that age, 18, 19, 20, I decided I wasn't going to have children. Now, as a gay man, there was more to it than just a decision that some other folks might have. Because as a gay man, I also was looking at it and going, well, You know, what I see out in the world is gay men who end up in heterosexual relationships in order to have a family. And for me, my judgment up for myself at that age was that that wasn't what I wanted for me. But I also didn't want to pass on that crazy gene either. And so I didn't think about having children. I didn't look at it from that perspective. I didn't want to have children. And I think the real defining piece for me about that was that I had not grown to the point where I could look at Scott and see the value of Scott himself. What I was looking at was I was looking at, you know, here's what I was becoming because of my family tree. And so I was worried about passing them on, not passing me on, right? There wasn't a me in the equation yet. So I have to say, you know, a couple of things about the nature versus nurture piece. Because I am a physicist, I'm not going to tell you that genetics is all wrong, right? I'm a scientist. Heck, I look in the mirror, you know, and I see my father more and more every day. Now for me, my father was 51 years old when I was born, and I don't have any pictures of him from before I was born. So it's really only been, you know, now I'm in my 50s, I can actually compare myself, and I go, wow, look at that, that's my father. Absolutely, you know, we look alike. So absolutely, genetics has a place. It does form us to a point. But we all know brothers and sisters that are out there that have the same genes, they have the same family tree, the same nature, the same nurture, and yet they've come out very differently. So it's not everything. And we also know, you know, we talk about the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree, but I actually think that that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy too, you know. And I think we need to, as a people, as a society, as a congregation, we need to think about that a little bit from the perspective that, you know, there's some truth to it, and we have to open the possibility of something else coming out, because that's always the truth. You know, we believe and we teach in our philosophy that we have choice, and that our choice is powerful. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, says in Creative Mind, he says, we cannot escape the fact that we are made in such a way that at every step, life is a constant choice. The universe will never deny us anything. We choose and mind creates. We should endeavor to choose that which will express always a greater life, and we must remember that, and this is the important piece, we must remember that the Spirit is always seeking to express love and beauty through us. Spirit is always looking to express love and beauty through us. Absolutely. So what we're saying is we get to choose. We have a choice in the matter. We have a choice to look at our past, to look at our family tree, to look at our genes and look at our nurture and say, that's going to define me, and that's what I'm going to pass on. Or we get a choice to look and say, how is it that Spirit is looking to express love and beauty through me? How is that? And which one do we believe? Which one do you believe? That's really the important piece. Which one do you believe? So let's come back to the NPR story. I promised you that I was going to give you something happier out of the NPR story. And so we're not done quite with it yet. So the NPR story goes on, and the woman says, she tells the man that she feels really guilty. She feels guilty because her father, her bloodline, killed his father. And what he tells her is he says, I know that your father was mentally ill, and that his actions didn't express the truth of him. His actions were a result of that illness. And what she said in return is that you have more heart for my father than I do. You have more heart for my father than I do. And then she goes on to say, meeting you helped my heart and soul to know that there is love and compassion in the world, even when there is so much darkness. I think the lesson out of this is that sometimes, we need the compassion of others to teach us how to tend to our family tree. It was a simple statement on his part. It was a simple knowingness on his part. And it made for a transformation on her part. And I think that's one of the secrets to tending to the family tree, is sometimes we can't find the compassion ourselves that we need. But when that's true for you, then there's a possibility for somebody else to find it for you. Just like the man did for the woman, in our community, we can go to practitioners. We can go to a practitioner after service today under ministry of prayer, and we can ask for prayer. And the prayer is for ourselves and for the other person. It's for our realization of that person, and they're going to know for us and our family member, they're going to know that the truth is God is looking to express love and beauty through you, through your family tree. That's a universal truth. It's nothing anybody has to make up. It's just the truth. So I want to say that, as we, a congregation, go through our lives, we have a lot of opportunity then to impact people, because we know a little bit about compassion, right? We teach compassion here. And so what I want to suggest is that as you go out into the world, you have the opportunity to be a place of compassion. Now, a few months ago, I had a workshop. It was a 4-week workshop I had a lot of fun with people and it was called Living Compassionately. And I built this workshop around a book by Father Greg Boyle. And his book is Tattoos on the Heart. If you haven't read this book, it's a real tearjerker, but it is filled with wisdom also. And Father Greg writes from the place of being a minister out of the Dolores missions, where he works with gangs in East LA through Homeboy Industries. And he walks out among the gang members. And I find this fascinating because, when we go out and we work with people and we go to be with people in a compassionate way, gang members are probably the people that you would look at and they're the easiest to hold your compassion back from. Because of the violence, because of all the stuff that they do and the danger that is around them. It's easy to hold your compassion back. But Father Greg goes out and he walks in those neighborhoods and he is compassionate. And he says that you need to know the difference in order to do that work. You need to know the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Where sympathy is you go up to somebody and you say, I'm so sorry for the loss of your mother. And empathy is when you go up to somebody and you say, I'm so sorry for the loss of your mother. I lost my mother too. But compassion, it comes from the place of the heart that's open wide to the infinite. Compassion comes from that place of God knowing absolutely, fully and completely, with no reservations, so that you, every person that you will ever meet, is exactly who they need to be. That's compassion. That's love. That's divine love. And that's what we channel through us when we know compassion for another person. Now, Father Greg, he goes on to talk about kinship. We're in expansive kinship for the month. And he says, Mother Teresa diagnosed the world's ills in this way. We've just forgotten that we belong to each other. Kinship is what happens to us when we refuse to let that happen. Kinship is what happens to us when we refuse to let that happen, when we refuse to forget that we belong to each other. We can put up a lot of barriers to people when we go out to help them. Barriers of, I'm greater, you're less than. I have something that you need to come get it from me. Right? You need to listen to the wisdom that I have for you. That's not kinship. That's, I don't know, social services maybe. Kinship is when you go out and you work from the perspective of Jesus and you walk with people. Father Greg says kinship, not serving the other, but being one with the other. Jesus was not a man for others, he was one with them. So when we go out to do good works in the world, that's what we need to do. We need to walk with them, walk next to them. So we've had the story from NPR, the hijacking story, that taught us about how compassion shows up for the woman and helps her to get rid of that guilt. But there's another story I want to tell you. This is a story I think you guys are going to know. It comes from that great Disney movie, Lilo and Stitch. How many of you guys have seen Lilo and Stitch? Yeah, sure. I love that movie. I think it's a great movie. It's got a great message. But I'm wondering if you realized when you were watching Lilo and Stitch that it was really about tending your family tree, right? Now, if you haven't watched the movie, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Stitch, funny name for a character, but he's an alien, right? And he's this genetic experiment which the galactic overlords have decided are too dangerous to be among people of any type. And so they sentence him to go out on an asteroid and be by himself for the rest of his native life. But he ends up hijacking a spaceship which crashes on Earth, and Lilo, a little woman, a little girl from Hawaii, ends up adopting him as a puppy because he kind of looks puppyish with really sharp teeth and, stitches, but that's okay, He does kind of look puppyish, and she takes him in. And she basically grafts his little branch onto her family tree. She adopts him. And that's what adoption. That's what adoption means, is you graft that branch onto your family tree. I'm crying because I've adopted 3 sons. So the wonderful thing about Lilo is that she believes in the Hawaiian tradition of ohana. And there's a quote out of the movie that has Stitch. It's really cute. I put a link on the website for this week. It's Stitch saying, ohana means family. Family means nobody is left behind or forgotten. That's a wonderful line. It's a wonderful way to tend to your family tree. And it's all about compassion. It's all about having compassion for the people that are in your family tree, whether they started there or you grafted them on at a later time. And basically the story ends up by the end of the story, Stitch is transformed from this ferocious, fearsome, puppy-like creature to a creature which now the Galactic Overlords has said that his heart has opened up and that he's now safe to be out in the world. So we really have two intertwined stories today. We have the story from NPR on the hijacker, where we learn that we make judgments about ourselves and about our family based on nature and nurture. But we also learn that compassion from others can help us to deal with that. It can help us to transform those judgments into something that comes more from love. And then we learn from Lilo and Stitch, we learn that we can be a source of our own compassion, just like Lilo was. We can be a source of our own compassion for our own family tree. And that when we do that there is a possibility, just a possibility, because there's choice in the world. There's a possibility that people on our family tree might open up. And they might have their heart open wide because of us. So my challenge to you guys for this week is twofold. Number one is around your family tree. You know, if you want, these are always voluntary things. If you wish and it feels safe for you, then take a look at your family tree and see if there's a place that you've been holding back your heart that maybe you could open your heart. Now, I want you to trust your own internal wisdom about your family tree. Because not everybody in our family tree at this moment is safe, right? So, but you don't have to do it in person. That's the beauty of this work, is it's internal work. And if you can't come to a place of compassion for somebody that you want to come to compassion with, then our practitioners will help you. Our practitioners will pray for you. Pray for them and hold them up high. And also, I want you, the second part is look at how you could live from a place of expansive kinship out in the world. Because we've seen what the effect is of that compassion moving from the man to the woman in the interview. It's beautiful. So see where you can open up yourself. Because to be honest, when we walk in that place of compassion, when we walk in a place of knowing divine love, when we walk in that place of knowing that God wants to express as love and as beauty in all creatures, that's when we walk in grace. Thank you. Namaste. So let's just turn within. And I invite the practitioners or whoever else wishes to hold the space today for us to go ahead and stand. And I drop down into that place that knows the power and the presence that God is. As me, as you, as each and every person in this world, whether they're connected to us by a family tree or they are just somebody that you meet on a street corner. I know that's the truth of them because it's the truth of God. It's the truth of Spirit. It's the truth of the one life that we all live together. It's the truth of how we express and are intended to express. It's the truth of how Spirit flows through us with natural motive force. It's the truth of how the universe bends around us in order to express more fully and more completely that love and beauty in, as, and through our lives. And so I know that it is from that truth that I speak my word. I speak my word knowing absolutely that the life and the power and the presence that is God is moving through each and every person here, each and every person that we touch, each and every person that we know, each and every person in the world, because there is no differentiation in spirit. There is only the one. There's only the one life, and I know that life is good. I know that life is love, and I know it is peace, and I know it is joy, and I know it fills us up to full and overflowing only when we just have to say yes. It's always there. It's always pushing. It's always pleading. All we have to do is say yes. And so I just recognize that. I know it. I live it. I am it. I know it for you. I know you live it. And I am so grateful for that knowledge. I'm so grateful to know that truth. And I release this prayer into the law, knowing that it's already fulfilled in the mind that God is. And I say it is good and very good, and so it is.
I am the song.